What's up guys, my name is Ace, and welcome back to another gun guide. This is the series where I go into great detail with all of the stats of every one of the weapons in Black Ops 4 multiplayer. In today's episode, we're finally going to be covering the last sniper rifle, and this is the SDM. Now the SDM is a very unique sniper rifle. It's not like the other ones that have a consistent one-shot kill potential. This is a semi-automatic sniper rifle that will always be a two-shot kill unless you get headshots with the high caliber attachment, in which case it will be a one-shot kill. Our damage profile is 95, and this doesn't drop off, so this will deal 95 damage at all ranges, and therefore it will very comfortably always be a two-shot kill. I should also point out that this gun doesn't rely on multipliers like with the other sniper rifles in this game. It deals the same amount of damage if you shoot him in the toe or if you shoot him in the upper chest. Our rate of fire with the SDM is by far the fastest in the sniper rifle category, but pretty slow when you compare it to other semi-autos in this game at 252 rounds per minute, and we don't have the option to use rapid fire. Our aim down sight time is surprisingly slow on the SDM. It's the same as the Paladin at 400 milliseconds. I'm not too sure why they decided to make it so slow with this gun, since it is a semi-auto and it's not really designed for quick scoping anyways. I thought it would have a slightly faster aim down sight time, and also there's no option to use quick draw with this. Now normally with sniper rifles, our practical time to kill is going to be equal to our aim down sight time, but with the SDM, since it is generally a two-shot kill, we get a statistical minimum time to kill of 238 milliseconds, which is very fast and will definitely outgun most of the other weapons in this game. But keep in mind that assumes that you're already aimed down sight and the first shot starts the timer. As for the SDM against armor users, even without any attachments, it will still always be a two-shot kill. So armor really has no effect against the SDM, aside from the fact that if you only hit one shot with the SDM, that person will leave that fight with more health afterwards. But it will still always be a two-shot kill even without the FMJ attachment. So the FMJ attachment on the SDM is actually useless for you if you're using it specifically to target armor users. This brings us to hipfire, and as you can see here, we get the same hipfire spread with all of the sniper rifles, and that is a very wide hipfire spread, so I definitely wouldn't recommend hipfiring unless you're using the laser sight attachment, which does tighten your hipfire spread very significantly, and it actually makes hipfiring up close a very viable tactic. As for the amount of time we can hold our breath for, this is the same as all of the other sniper rifles at 4 seconds, but generally with the SDM, you don't need to hold your breath, and it really only applies to hitting the first shot anyways. Once you start firing your gun, your idle sway will stop completely, and now you're just dealing with recoil. Having said that, the SDM does have a noticeable amount of idle sway. It looks like it's about the same as the Paladin and the Koshka without any attachments. And therefore, I do like using the stabilizer attachment, so I never have to hold my breath with this gun, because it gives me significantly improved idle sway. As for recoil, as you can see here, without attachments, there is a decent amount of recoil. Your gun will bounce around a little bit, and oftentimes I find if I'm aiming center mass, the recoil will take me up over their shoulder, and I will end up missing shots due to recoil if I'm not using the grip attachment. When we put grip 1 on the SDM, it does noticeably reduce our recoil, and at this point, generally speaking, I'm not going to be missing shots due to recoil. If I'm missing, it's simply because I'm off target. However, if we want to take it to that next level and go completely overkill with this, we can use grip 2, and as you can see here, with grip 2, you perfectly recenter between every shot, and you essentially have no recoil whatsoever. I would say this is very unnecessary compared to grip 1. I think grip 1 is generally just fine for reducing the recoil down to the point where you don't have to worry about recoil, but the added benefit with grip 2 is it reduces your flinch when shot, and this can definitely help you in a lot of situations, and therefore I really do like using both of the grip attachments on this gun. Moving on to our magazine capacity, we get a 12-round magazine with 36 total starting ammo, which is kind of decent, but then again, with it being semi-auto, you will burn through that fairly quickly. So we do have the option to use Extended Mag 1 as well as Extended Mag 2, and with Extended Mag 1 we get 16 rounds with 48 total starting ammo, and Extended Mag 2 will increase that up to 20 rounds with 60 total starting ammo. It's often nice using at least one of the Extended Mag attachments simply because our reload add time is relatively slow at 2.17 seconds. If you get yourself in a tough situation and you got enemies coming, oftentimes you won't have the time to get a reload in, and this can really screw you over with this gun. Our sprint out time with the SDM is a little bit more significant than with the other sniper rifles because you don't have to necessarily fully aim down sight before firing your first shot, especially if you're using laser sight. This sprint out time is pretty slow at 300 milliseconds, but we can reduce that down to 220 milliseconds if we use the Gung Ho perk. As for the amount of time it takes to swap to a pistol, this is 625 milliseconds without any perks, which isn't quite as important as with the other sniper rifles, because if you miss a shot with the SDM, you've got another shot ready to go, whereas with the other sniper rifles, oftentimes if you miss a shot, your only hope is to swap to that pistol. But we can also reduce this time down to 510 milliseconds with the dexterity perk. Our movement speed with the SDM is 95%, which is pretty standard for the sniper rifles, assault rifles, and tactical rifles in this game. And it's a similar story with our aim down sight stray speed. This is 40%, which once again is pretty much standard. So with that pretty much covers it for the most important stats for the SDM. Now let's start moving into my recommended attachments before we get into a couple great example classes I have for you guys. So first up we have the optics, and with the SDM, I don't mind these standard sights, especially if I'm playing more of a traditional sniper role where I'm trying to hang back at longer ranges. But if I am trying to play a little bit more close to mid-range, I will typically use the dual zoom optic. I really like this one. It just seems to work quite well. I'm not really a fan of the holographic, the threat detector, or the iron sights. I think the iron sights are actually extremely obstructive with this, and it just feels really wrong, especially due to the fact that you don't get aim assist with the STM. And that just leaves us with the thermal sight, which I don't typically use, but it's not a bad option if that's something you're into. As for the other attachments, I really feel the SDM relies on attachments. This gun without attachments is really not that great, and it's hard to handle and hard to use, but once you start stacking up on a bunch of these attachments, then it actually becomes a very viable gun. With this, I really like using the grip attachments. Sometimes, like I said, I'll just use one grip attachment. Other times I'll use both of the grip attachments so that I don't have very much flinch when enemies shoot at me, and I essentially have zero recoil. With extended mags, this is the type of attachment that I will sometimes put on, but I don't always need it. I don't rely on extended mags. It's always just kind of nice to have if I've got extra space available. FMJ is something I pretty much never use on the STM because it doesn't really matter against armor users. It's going to be a two-shot kill with or without the FMJ attachment. And this just means it's only really helping you if you're shooting through something, and that doesn't happen all that often, so I generally just don't use FMJ at all. Stabilizer is an excellent attachment. Like I said, this only applies to hitting your first shot, but I really like using it because that means I really never have to hold my breath with the STM, because once you start shooting, it's only recoil you have to deal with. Moving on to high caliber. High caliber is an excellent attachment on the SDM. I don't know the exact multiplier with high caliber. I just know that it makes it a one-shot kill to the head, whereas without high caliber, it's still going to take 2 shots to kill to the head. And therefore, a lot of the times, I really like using this attachment. This just leaves us with laser sight, and I think laser sight is great on the SDM if you're trying to play a little bit more aggressively. Hip firing up close is absolutely a viable tactic if you're using laser sight, whereas if you don't use laser sight, I would say it's not viable at all. So as you can see there are a lot of attachments that I like running on the SDM, and therefore when I'm creating classes for this, I often only use 1 or 2 perks, if that. Generally, I like to stack up very attachment heavy, so let's start getting into a couple great example classes. These are classes that work for me and classes that I really enjoy. First up, this is a class that I will use if I want to be more of a traditional sniper where I'm hanging back and picking off people at longer ranges. It's not so much for being aggressive and trying to challenge people up close or at mid-range. So with this, we're just using the default optic. We've got both of the grip attachments, so we've got that pinpoint accuracy, and if somebody happens to shoot back at us at longer ranges, we won't be flinching way off target. We've got high caliber on here because this is all about precision with this class. That will give us that ability to one-shot people in the head, especially if they're head glitching something at longer ranges. This is excellent for taking them out. And finally, for attachments, we have stabilizer, and this just means that we generally won't have to hold our breath at all and will still be very accurate. With this one, since it is designed for longer ranges, I do have a secondary on this, and I just put the Cap 40 on. Really, you can use whichever pistol you want. It doesn't really matter, but I just like having a secondary with this because if somebody gets up close and personal, my SDM isn't going to be quite as effective as I'd like. Our gear is going to be acoustic sensor. I really like using acoustic sensor while sniping just because it prevents people from sneaking up on me without me knowing that they're coming first. And this just leaves us with 1 class point, and I decided to spend that on dexterity, which will just allow us to swap to our pistol a little bit faster. So that's our more traditional sniping class. Now let's get into my more aggressive SDM class. I actually prefer running the SDM this way and being more aggressive with it rather than hanging back. And with this, we're using the dual zoom optic. We've got both of the grip attachments once again, so we've got that accuracy, and also mainly we get that flinch reduction, which is really helpful when you're trying to be aggressive. We're running extended mags on this because generally we're going to be pushing the enemies and we won't have as much time to reload in a lot of situations as we would if we were hanging back. And this just leaves us with laser sight. Laser sight is great when you're trying to be aggressive with the SDM because if you get somebody at point blank range, you don't even need to aim down sight, just hip fire them and it's usually a pretty easy kill. Once again, for our gear, we've got acoustic sensor, and this just gives us that little early indication if somebody's getting close to us, so we can either pre-aim because we do have that slow aim down sight time, or we can just get ready and hip fire them. This just leaves us with 1 extra point, and with this one, we're going to be using dead silence because since we're being aggressive and pushing towards the enemy, we don't want them to be picking us up with their acoustic sensor, and we don't want them hearing our footsteps. So with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's gun guide with the SDM. As always, I'd like to know in the comment section below, what do you guys think about this gun? Do you think it's a good gun, a not so good gun? Do you think it needs a buff, a nerf, or it's perfectly fine as is? Just let me know what you guys are thinking down below. Personally, I really don't think the SDM is a very good gun. It's usable, I can do okay with it, but I would much rather be using something like an auger, which has pretty much double the fire rate cap. It's still going to be a 2-shot kill if you're using both high caliber attachments and hitting them in the upper chest. It's got much better handling, and in the console version of the game, which is what I play, you also get aim assist with the auger, whereas you don't with the SDM. As a result, I really don't feel the SDM has a great place in this game, and if it were up to me, the thing I would change with it is perhaps give it a slightly faster aim down sight time. Nothing too ridiculous, but I don't think it should be as slow as something like the Paladin. I think it should be more along the lines of like 350 milliseconds, which is still much slower than the assault rifles, but at least a little bit faster than where it's at currently. Now, if you guys have missed any of the previous episodes of Gun Guides, we've now covered all of the primary weapons that are currently in the game. I will leave a link to the playlist down below, and we will start kicking off these secondary weapons with the next episode. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.
Yeah.